Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. It's time to take some of your questions, and we've got a couple on the Patreon this week from Martin. His first question is, do we still have cabinet government in Canada? 30 years ago, you'd see ministers coming and going from weekly cabinet meetings, and I haven't seen that in a very long time. On Irish radio, ministers frequently mention policies or initiatives that they like to, or that they will take to cabinet. One gets a real sense of collective decision making. Could Canada return to such a standard? So to the first part of your question, we sort of still have cabinet governance, but it's messy and it's complicated. Part of it is we still do have some ministers who can run their own shops, and we have ministers who can't. This is part of what comes with the somewhat Canadian cabinet construction, where you are focused very much on regional representation as well as other kinds of diversity around that table, which does not give you an even level of ability, but also does bring lots of different perspectives to the table. And I have spoken to a number of cabinet ministers during interviews who keep talking about how having so many diverse viewpoints around the table is really helpful in their decision making. So there is some of that helps. We have just this last week, for example, had ministers Randy Boissonnault and Marcy Ian talk about how they're going to spend the next few months consulting on the issue of so-called parental rights in response to what Danielle Smith did in Alberta, and talk about ideas that they're going to bring to the cabinet table. So it does sound like that does still happen to an extent, but we do have this centralizing influence for a couple different reasons. One of them is obviously, yes, leaders' offices are far more powerful than they used to be. And yes, that is a problem. The other aspect, though, is that files are a lot more complicated than they used to be, and a lot of power is distributed horizontally, which means issues will affect 2 or 3 different departments at once. So it's rare to get a single minister who's able to take a lead on things, and that's why you have a much more reliance on PCO and a kind of central coordinating body in order to deal with complex files that touch on different departments. So there is back and forth and give and take to why things operate the way they do. Yes, it would be great if we could have ministers who were a lot more independent and cabinet government being much more robust than it is currently. Trudeau did give it a shot back in 2015. He did tried to make cabinet government work, and then realized that not everyone was able to bring something to the table that they should have been able to. We've always had some ministers who are able to kind of do their own thing and others who are not. And also, like I said, because policy files are so much more complex, that it's hard to have single ministers lead on a lot of things. Other observation I would make is that under Trudeau, the full cabinet meets pretty much every week that they're sitting. It's less publicized, but we do still see ministers going in and out of West Block for this. There are still scrums that happen, not as much as we would like, but it does happen. In the Harper era, they rarely had full cabinet meetings. They usually just relied on cabinet committees meeting, and they ensured that media was not around for those meetings, and kicked us out of the floor where we used to be able to scrum ministers and so on. So there has been a little progress back in the right direction, but it's not the way it should be. And yeah, that's where it is. Martin's second question is, could the House of Commons bring in a rule prohibiting the use of QP clips in social media Not that I can see it happening, but should it? I personally think yes, it should. I also think that would be almost impossible to enforce, because if they try rules around things like the copyright or things like that, I just think that would be virtually impossible to enforce, because you would have everyone else making their own clips, or you'd see them filming a TV and making it obvious that that's what they're doing, or so on. This is one of these kinds of problems that relies on people being good faith actors and being grown-ups, and we don't have that in politics right now, and that's a problem. Parliament, or the House of Commons in any case, could come up with a rule that prohibits MPs or their proxies from using these clips. I don't think it's likely to happen. MPs of all parties find it far too convenient for them to have the system work the way it does right now, and so unfortunately, balance of convenience here. I wish it could happen. I just don't see any impetus or incentive for it to happen. Maybe if we had some level of, or something, some kind of event that would happen that would force MPs to be more serious and return to debating as it should be, that would be great. That would be wonderful. I just worry about what severity of a crisis would have to be in order for that to happen. And hopefully the remedy is not worse than the problem. But yeah, I wish they could. I unfortunately doubt that they will. Our last question this week is on Twitter, and it's from Don Masters, who asks, do you think the NDP will continue its arrangement with government until the 2025 election? Yes. The NDP still have not paid off their debts from the last election. They claim that they're getting close. They don't have any kind of a war chest saved up for the next election to happen, so it is in their interests to keep this going as long as possible. As well, they're getting everything they want. They've got dental care. They're going to get some version of pharmacare or some steps toward it in any case, because that is going to rely on premiers really in the long run. But they're going to get some level of coverage for people around that. In the meantime, it costs them absolutely no effort. They are claiming all of the credit. And that's an arrangement that works very well for them. As well, they're actually learning a lot about how government works, because the government is bringing them into some of the deliberation and explanation around how the processes and systems work, so that it gives them a bit of an education in terms of how government works, because most of those MPs have no clue, never having been part of a government, provincial, and certainly not federal. So they are learning more about how that kind of stuff works as well. So it's kind of in their interest to keep this going. As well, I mean, for the government, there is absolutely no reason why they would go to an election before interest rates start coming down again. So that's going to keep going, and we'll see. There will be performative tantrums, absolutely, particularly around pharmacare and the ongoing housing situation. But yeah, they're going to keep it going regardless. So there we are. And that's everything for this week. Thank you for your questions. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at Journo_Dale on Twitter, and JournoDale _, on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.